Welcome to this lesson on solving and writing division equations. Please make sure you have these notes in front of you so we can begin our lesson. And my students, let's make sure we update our table of contents. This lesson has two learning objectives. The first one says I can solve a one-step division equation, and the second one says I can write a one-step division equation. For the key concepts, let's talk about the inverse of division. So we know from previous lessons that the word inverse means opposite, so the inverse of division, or the opposite of division, is multiplication. And whenever we balance equations, the main goal is to isolate the variable. So in order to isolate the variable, we need to use the multiplication property of equality to keep our equations balanced. So since we're speaking of balancing equations, let's talk about this little scale. The center, which is our fulcrum or our equal sign, is the center point that's going to keep it balanced. So right now my scale is balanced because I have one arrow on each side. But if I want to multiply one side of it by 4, it's not going to be balanced anymore because the left-hand side will have more arrows on it. So what I would need to do is I would need to multiply the other side by 4 as well to keep it balanced. So if I multiply both sides by 4, I would get 4 arrows on the left-hand side and 4 arrows on the right-hand side. This is an example of using the multiplication property of equality because I multiplied both sides of the scale by 4 to keep it balanced. So let's use this key concept to discuss the following examples. So example 1 says solve a divided by 3 equals 7, and then let's check our solution. So the first thing we want to do is let's draw the fulcrum down the center of our equal sign. And we're going to start on the side that has the variable. Now the variable is on the left-hand side, and we are dividing the variable by 3. So let's do the opposite of dividing the variable by 3, and let's multiply it by 3, or 3 over 1. Now remember, if we multiply it by 3 over 1 to one side, we have to make sure we multiply it by 3 over 1 on the other side. This is an example of using the multiplication property of equality because we multiplied both sides by 3. So on the left-hand side, 3 divided by 3 will cross out, and a is all left by itself, equal to, and on the right-hand side, we can multiply 7 times 3, which becomes 21. So the value of a is equal to 21. And let's go back and check this and plug it back into our solution, or our equation. So if a is equal to 21, so 21 divided by 3, when we do the math, we do get 7. So we checked our work. Now let's go ahead and graph our solution on a number line. Let's place 0 in the center. And 21 would be probably someplace on this area. And I'm going to identify it with a solid circle because 21 is the only number that would make this equation true. For example 2, it says solve 30 equals b divided by 2, and let's check our solution. So once again, let's draw the fulcrum down the center of the equal sign, and we have two different sides to our equation. We're going to start on the right-hand side because that's where the variable's at, and since we're dividing by 2, to get b by itself, we have to do the opposite of dividing by 2, so let's multiply by 2 over 1. But if I multiply one side by 2 over 1, I have to make sure I multiply the other side by 2 over 1 as well. This is an example of using the multiplication property of equality because we multiplied both sides by 2 to keep our equation balanced. So on the right-hand side, we can cross-cancel, so 2 divided by 2 goes away, and now b is all by itself. So we've isolated the variable. And on the left-hand side, we can say 2 times 30 is equal to 60. Let's plug our value of b back into the equation. So 60 divided by 2, when we do the math, we do get 30, so we checked our work. Now let's go ahead and plot this on a number line. So 0 would be down here, and the value of 60 is a positive number, so it's going to go in the positive region. And I'm going to identify it with a solid circle because that's the only number that will make this equation true. So pause the video and complete these guided problems, and we'll discuss the answers in class tomorrow. Notice I've got two problems on this slide, guided problem A and guided problem B. And let's make sure you show us a number line that has your solution on it. For example 3, it says solve 3/4 times x equals 1/8, and then let's check our solution. So this problem, we are still multiplying 3/4 times x, because when 3/4 is standing in front of x, we're going to assume that we are multiplying. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do, let's draw the fulcrum down the center of the equal sign. And we're going to start on the left-hand side of the equal sign because that's where the variable is at. So since I'm multiplying by 3/4, let's get rid of that 3/4 by dividing, or doing the opposite of multiplying. So let's divide by 3/4. But remember, you can't divide fractions unless you multiply by the reciprocal. So instead of dividing by 3/4, I need to multiply by the reciprocal, which is 4/3. So if I multiply one side by the reciprocal, I have to multiply the other side by the reciprocal as well. This is an example of using the multiplication property of equality because we multiplied both sides by 4/3. So let's rewrite this problem so it looks a lot cleaner. On the left-hand side, the 4 and the 4 will cross out, and the 3 and the 3 will cross out. And now x is all by itself, which is what we wanted. Now let's go ahead and multiply the right-hand side. So the numerator will be 4, and the denominator will be 24. And we can simplify that further to get 1/6. So the answer should be 1/6. Let's plug this back into our equation to make sure we do get the same answer. So I'm going to take 3/4 times 1/6, and if I multiply the top, I get 3. If I multiply the bottom, I get 24. But if you reduce that by 3, top and bottom, you will get 1/8. So our answer does check. So let's graph this on a number line. Here's 0, and 1/6 is our answer, so 1/6 is positive. So 1/6 will go here, and this is a solid dot because 1/6 is the only number that will make this equation true. So pause the video and complete this guided problem, and we'll discuss the answers in class tomorrow. Please make sure you also graph your solution on a number line. For example 4, it says the weight of an object on the moon is 1/6 that of its weight on Earth. If an object weighs 35 pounds on the moon, write and solve a division equation to find its weight on Earth. So for this problem, we can write two different types of equations that mean the same exact thing. I'm going to use the variable e for Earth so that I can use this to help me write the equation. So if we read the problem, it says the weight of the moon of an object on the moon is 1/6 of. This word of is another word that means multiply. So I'm going to write my equation by saying 1/6 times the Earth's object has to equal the weight of the object, which was 35 pounds on the moon. So we can solve this by drawing our fulcrum down the center of the equal sign. And we're going to start on the side that has the variable. Notice we are multiplying the 1/6 and the e. So I want to do the opposite. So let's divide both sides by 1/6. Remember, that's the division property of equality if I divide both sides by 1/6. However, you can't divide fractions. The way that you can divide fractions is by multiplying by the reciprocal, which was 6/1. So I can't just do that to one side. I have to make sure I multiply both sides by 6/1. So I'm going to rewrite this problem. I've got 6/1 times 1/6 e equals 35 times 6/1. On the left-hand side of the fulcrum, the 6 and the 6 cross out, the 1 and the 1 cross out, and I'm left with my variable v. And if I multiply 35 times 6, I get 210 pounds on Earth. The second way that we can write this problem is anytime that you multiply a fraction by another number, you can rewrite it using division. So instead of multiplying by 1/6, what you can do is you can divide e by 6. So multiplying by 1/6 is the same as dividing by 6. Set that equal to 35. And we can solve this problem by drawing a fulcrum down the equal sign. And on the left-hand side, in order to isolate the variable, I need to get rid of that 6 on the bottom. So let's go ahead and, instead of divide by 6, let's do the opposite and multiply by 6, or 6 over 1 on both sides. The 6 is crossed out, and e is all by itself, and 35 times 6 gets me 210 pounds on Earth. So remember, if you multiply by a fraction, it's the same as dividing by the denominator. So pause the video and complete this got it problem, and we'll discuss this answer in class tomorrow. So now that you've completed this lesson, go ahead and self-rate yourself and let us know how you feel. If there's any part of this lesson that you do not understand, please go back and watch it again. Also, come to class with some questions so we can discuss it in further detail.